Governance and Development Conversation, proudly brought to you by African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, ANEJ, will focus on the Bright Futures project. What is this project about? Bright Futures project is implemented by TAG International in partnership with ANEJ in Edo and Bayelsa states. The project utilizes the PREVENT concept of providing meaningful alternative pathways to youths most likely to join crime. It aims to divert and disengage them from involving serious and organized crime like cybercrime, cultism, human trafficking, irregular migration, and drugs and substance abuse. Additionally, the Brighter Futures project is also being implemented in Lagos and Zamfara states. The project started in January 2022, which is expected to end in March 2025. The PREVENT structure is designed to have multi-agency partners working at 3 levels, such as PREVENT Advisory Board, PAB, Crime Prevention Steering Group, CPSG, and Crime Prevention Partnership, CPP. Each of these groups plays a distinct role in driving the crime prevention process. At the inception phase of the project team held consultations with different stakeholders in both states, including engagement with state government in Edo State, which gave birth to the establishment of the Crime Prevention Steering Group, CSPG, at the state level, and Crime Prevention Partnership, CPP, at 2 LGAs, Uredo and Ipobaha. In collaboration with project partners, CPSG and CPP members have implemented interventions across various communities and government secondary schools, reaching over 504 targeted beneficiaries. These interventions have effectively addressed the 4 major crimes in the state from the period of 2022 to March 2025. The initiative continues to work towards creating safer communities and sustainable opportunities for youth through strategic partnership and proactive crime prevention efforts. Our guest today on the program, Governance and Development Conversation, proudly brought to you by ANEJ, is the Gender Officer, who is also the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer of ANEJ, and is also the State Coordinator of the Brighter Futures Project, Sandra Egwuagie. Sandra, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
What has been the experience like as far as the Brighter Futures project is concerned? But just give us more insight on what informed this project and how ANEJ was able to take a leadership role in driving this community development initiative.
Okay. The Brighter Future project, like you said, started in 2022. But before the project started, TAG International, who is the implementing partner that work with ANEJ, did a research, the carrier did a research in Nigeria for the 4th state, looking at the type of crimes that are prevalent in those states. So when the research was conducted, it shows that in Edo, we have more of cyber crime and more of youths involved in cyber crime and human trafficking. In Bayelsa State, more of cultism. In Lagos State, was more of cyber crime, land grabbing and cultism, and Zamfara State, more of kidnapping. So that was the baseline of the research when it came up. So what they did was to look for partners within these states that have done some work concerning either crime or that are very effective in the country. Okay. So that is how they engage ANEJ as their partner. So during the proposal stage, they also call ANEJ in terms of asking what kind of intervention, what kind of work can be done. So that was how ANEJ was joined as a partner in terms of this Brighter Future project. So ANEJ was now the anchor partner for Edo and Bayelsa State. So when that is just the Brighter Future project. So when the project began, what we did was to look at agencies that have mandates to tackle crime, because the project was looking at a multi-stakeholders approach, looking at different agencies that tackle crime, and looking at also the community representative, how they will come in. So what we did as ANEJ was to map out different agencies. That is how we map out the police, EFCC, NAPTIP, NDLEA, immigration, looking at these agencies that already have their primary mandate in tackling crime. So we now went for consultation to introduce the project to them.
Okay.
So for us to get their buy-in. So when we did that, having met all the stakeholders, we have to call for a stakeholders meeting to bring all these stakeholders together. So what we did was also to introduce the project to them collectively in terms of them to see what it's all about. So that is where we now form the CPSG. The CPSG is the Crime Prevention Steering Group at the state level, because that's what the project wants, that there should be a stakeholder that works on this project. So we'll have to form that. Then at the local government level, we're looking at the Crime Prevention Partnership, looking at stakeholders from the local government area. Then that's how we brought in the Oredo. We're looking at 2 local government areas, because it was like a pilot. We're looking at Oredo and Bobaha. So we brought them in. Then these stakeholders, they have different duties. Their duty was to map out different communities where this crime is more prevalent, because we know that we cannot work in all the community as at that time. So when we brought in the stakeholders, we were looking at, okay, what community do we look at? So that's how they map out the different communities. So when they did that, we were able to look at the leadership in the community. We have to bring in the Enoge, the youth leader. So that is how we brought in those leaders. And we also have to include the religious body because of their role.
Influence.
Yes.
Okay.
So those ones are at the state level now form the CPSG, which is the Crime Prevention Steering Group. Then those ones at the local level now form the CPP, which is the Crime Prevention Partnership. So we also brought in other CSO that are also working on youth-related issues. That's how the project
Fantastic.
works. Yeah.
Fantastic. Very interesting storyline, I must say. But share with us on the key actions, activities, projects that the Brighter Futures Project embarked upon to tackle the issue of those that are likely going to go into crime. Because I think when you look at the whole project, you come to the realization is about prevention. Because as they say, prevention is better than cure. All right, so what are those things that were done?
Okay, so the unique thing about the Brighter Future Project is this prevent approach.
Okay.
So what the prevent approach, the template was looking at the community. For example, as the CPSG has marked out the local governments and the TPP has been formed, we are looking at the community. So how do we know those youth that are likely to join crime? So what the project does was to look at those community representatives. They are in the community. They are there. They know the youth that are in those community. And there was a template that the project brought. The project brought what we call the risk factor template. That template has different factors. For example, if that person is unemployed, so that can make the youth, that individual, to join crime because he does not have anything doing. Then if he has a delinquent behavior, so if that person has a relation or a friend that has gone, that are involved in either cyber crime because of the influence. So there were different factors that help to determine if individual is vulnerable. So this template was given to the community representative. Now the community representative are the one now selecting the target beneficiaries based on that risk template. So in those communities that we have selected, so what they do is that they look at that template, look at the individuals in that community, young person, we're looking at young persons that maybe their education level is low, is unemployed, does not have anything he's doing. Then there are some, those that have violent behavior. So that was the criteria they used in selecting those target beneficiaries. So this beneficiary was selected by the community representative that were part of the Crime Prevention Partnership Group. So once the selection was done, they bring it to the project team. So the project team have to do another second assessment based on that risk template, because we will know that, so that people will not be influenced or bringing their person.
Because I was going to ask you that question, that leaving it to the chagrins of community leaders and youth leaders and stuff like that, what was done to avoid you know, manipulation and stuff like that?
So what we did was that after the selection by these community people who are the CPP, so we have that template. So we have to go through that template and also assess the beneficiaries that have been selected based on that criteria. So that was what we did. So that risk factor template helped us in assessing those target beneficiaries. So we did that. After that stage, that was where we now selected the beneficiaries that was needed. Then another unique part of the prevent was asking the individual, for example, now that you are not doing anything, what can you do that will make you likely not to jam crime? So there was the skill part of it, because the project was looking at resilience in terms of mindset change. Because we have various programs that have done vocational skill for youth, but people still go back to that. So what the project was talking about was that let them be a mindset change, behavioral change. Then before the vocational skill cannot be incorporated. So what we did was asking them, for example, what kind of skill do you want to have? So they had one that gave suggested. Okay, I want to learn tailoring. I want to learn electrical work. So that was how they indicated it. So what we now did was that after gathering this data, we still go back to the CPP. So what kind of program can we design? That's now the intervention stage. What kind of program can we design? So that's how they now brought it. Okay, let's look at social skill, communication skill. Let's look at life skill. Let's look at critical thinking. So they brought all those suggestions. Then, okay, which time? Where do we use? We now have to use the community. What kind of thing can we have? Okay, let's add sports. Sports is one thing that can disengage them. So this design, in terms of the intervention, was not done by the project team. It was done by the CPP. So collectively, they brought in those decisions and look at what we are going to do. So doing the resilience training once a week for 2 months or 3 months, depending on the duration. Because each intervention phase, we had about 6 intervention phases. So each intervention phase, we are having different activities that we have done. They will not have to bring in experts that were able to do the facilitation. Like bringing a psychologist to have one-on-one mentorship training with them, talk about use of drugs and the rest. So that is how the project was designed then before we implemented those.
Okay, let's talk about the actual implementation. I mean, it's quite interesting that in getting the futures projects, Brighter Futures project on course, there was a deliberate attempt to ensure that the beneficiaries were part of the design of the project. It wasn't like you dumped whatever you felt the beneficiaries needed upon them. You asked them what they would do to make them not to be vulnerable in going into crime and all of that, which is very instructive for me. So what were those specific activities? Because I could see some of the reviews and the testimonies. You had stuff that you did, hairdressing or hair making and stuff like that. Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, so when we did the first intervention, we asked some of them. Some said hairdressing, some said tailoring, some was carpentry. So depend on these things that they want. So what we did was to look for delivery partners that offer such training within the community. So after having, because the type of skill they show interest on, we determine the type of delivery partners we are going to engage. So we have to engage those delivery partners based on the skill that they have decided to do. So we did that, then also pay them stipends to go, because we don't want to have issues of I don't have transport, I don't have, there's no feeding, so we have to cover that cost. The project was able to cover for that cost, and they were able to attend those training. So those delivery partners were also brought into the project to let them know that it's not just about them having skill, but you're also to mentor them. Look at what the project is all about, just so that they would not be engaged in crime. So the delivery partners were also part of it. Yes, part of it.
Fantastic.
So they brought them in.
Okay, so in terms of the numbers, it's key we have numbers to buttress this, because I know that in Edo State, there have been instances where EFCC, for example, went to places and arrested Yahoo boys and all of that. The Brighter Futures project, for example, one of the key thematic areas to see how to arrest people who have that disposition towards, going into cyber crimes and stuff like that. So in terms of numbers, how would you describe the impact of that program? But before you answer that question, let's quickly take a quick break. It's still governance and development conversation, and it's coming to you on independent television, and the program is proudly brought to you by African Network for Environment and Economic Justice and Edge. Stay with us. The Brighter Futures Project, courtesy of NEDGE and TAG International, is the focus of our conversation today. A project designed to prevent in the sense of helping our young people go into crime and criminality. In this segment of the show, we're asking the gender officer, who is also the officer in charge of monitoring and evaluation, as well as the state coordinator of the Brighter Futures Project, NEDGE, Sandra Agwagi, giving us insights into all that has been done. What with the fact that the project is coming to an end this March 2025. So it's time to actually do some reflections and do some assessment and even some evaluation on what has been done. So in terms of the numbers, what do we have?
Okay, in terms of the number, when we look at the direct beneficiaries, we've been able to reach about 504 target beneficiaries in this 6th intervention phase. But between that to now, we did about 6 interventions.
6 intervention
yes.
phase. So how many people per intervention?
Okay, so for the first intervention phase, we had 14.
14.
Yes. While the second one, we had about 115. Then for the third phase, we had about 47. Then for the fourth phase, we have about 34. Then the fifth phase, we have about 50, I think 42 or 43.
Okay.
Then we also have the school part of it, the students. We have about 226 students reach. Okay,
there was, I think at some point, there was a football tournament stuff.
Yes.
Was that part of this project?
Yes.
So talk to me about that.
Okay, so what brought in the sports, during the first phase, when we did just 14, it was more of vocation and part of resilience. So at the second stage, the project team now came up to say, no, this program is not just about vocation, it's about mindset change. Of resilience training. So when it came, so because of the Nigeria context, we were saying, no, you can't just bring in people just telling them about mindset without giving them something to do. So that was where the sports was not introduced. And so, okay, let's bring in sports. So that was where the sports was introduced in the second phase. Okay. And that was where we have that large number. So in that second phase, we have about 115. What we did was that went to the different communities, because we are focusing on cyber crime at that part. Because in each intervention, we look at, there's a focus on the different type of crime, but we look at the major one. So at that second phase, we're looking at cyber crime. So we're saying, okay, how do we bring youth, more of the male, into the intervention? So what we have boys, youth are in football. So bringing, for us to have their interest, we have to say, okay, let's introduce football. At the end of the resilience training, there'll be a football competition. So they were just interested. We were interested in it. Okay, no problem. We'll be part of it. And we also said that if you don't complete the resilience training, you will not take part in the football competition. So that also drew their attention to be part of. So what we did was to go to different communities and also engage local clubs within the community. So that was how we brought in the football competition. At the end, what we did was that we're not actually looking for a winner in that competition. We are looking at, you can use your spare time to engage in football. To
develop yourself in football, in sports generally.
Because the project is about providing a meaningful pathway. And that is an alternative pathway that they can engage in. So that's how we brought in the sport. Then we all gave, both the first and the last, we gave them prize to show that this is not
just about winning. It's about mindset change, which is very key to the project.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And we also produced a jersey that they use that kind of show a kind of a message that says, say no to cybercrime, say no to human trafficking. Anytime they put it on, it reminds them of that program and what it's all about.
Okay, the program comes to an end in March, like we've established, I mean, in the course of our conversation. What is the future of this project?
Okay, so we've been looking at sustainability since the third year of the project. So what we are looking at is how the CPP, because the major impact was establishing the CPP and the CPSG, that even after the project, this structure will continue. So what we did in Edo was, how do we engage other development partners, other donors, for us to continue this work? So we have to design different proposals and looking at those institutions within the state that we can engage. So after we design the proposal, we have to give it to other donors to say, okay, let them support that as the project comes to an end by this March. Let's see if other donors will support for us to continue. Then secondly, we have active members in the CP and the CPG, like for example, the NAPTIP, they are very active. So what we say, okay, let's continue that message. When they are doing an awareness program, call us. So it's still creating that awareness because that institution is already there. Okay. So EFCC, the same thing. So let them keep on bringing that message of prevention, which is more of public sensitization. So that is one of the ways we say we'll continue.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, the numbers that you gave is quite encouraging. Over 500, yeah. I mean, for the project since inception in 2022, like you said. But when you take that number, interface it with the number of prospective candidates in Edo State, what's your assessment? Is there any proper correlation?
No, it is high.
The difference is much?
It is much.
Okay.
But the important thing is we establishing it within the community.
Okay.
Now, for example, the CPP members within the community, they understand what the prevent is. Let me give an example. For example, in Oka, Izemien, at Normal U of Pasak Mumba that we did. So what they did was that they also engaged other NGOs that comes within that community. And they know how to do that selection in terms of identifying the vulnerable people.
Okay.
So for that, that is kind of what will help us sustain that kind of project. Okay. In that area. So they know exactly what to do, how to identify persons within the community for other people that want to engage with them. So, but in terms of the number, it's really high.
Yeah.
But at least we have something, we started from somewhere. And we hope that we're going to get more proposals.
Okay, there's something I wanted to find out from you. You talked about some of the logistics that were provided for the beneficiaries, took care of their transportation, feeding, and maybe a stipend. Was there any template, any plan for maybe like a starter pack for them to, start off on their own? If you did, I mean, you learned hairdressing, for example, or maybe you did the tailoring or something. Was there anything like that for them to start off? Okay,
so at the first intervention, when they completed, though the project does not really provide that starter pack, but we also insisted. So what our niche did was to kind of provide for the first intervention phase, those other things. But this is one of the challenges that we had in the project. So we've been telling them that there's need for starter packs. Even after learning the skill, they need these starter packs for them to continue. Okay. So we'll be able to provide to some extent. But what we hope to do is that when the second phase starts, we'll have to start with these beneficiaries that have been empowered, that have been trained for them to have this starter pack. Fantastic. And that's why we are also calling on the government to also support, having done the training, so they can support them with starter pack.
All right, because you've already talked about expecting stakeholders to join, I'm not going to ask you any question about, what's your message to stakeholders and all of that, but specifically, what's your message to TAG International for this support to engender this project? Okay,
we appreciate TAG International for this support they've given to an age and given to young persons within the states. What we are also hoping that they continue the funding. Because we know that it's ending this year, though they promised that there will be an additional 2 years.
Okay, now this number that you gave, does that include Bayelsa State? Because the project
No.
Okay,
It's
this is just Edo State.
State.
So perhaps this conversation will continue. Maybe when we have you here on our next episode of the program, we'll talk about Bayelsa State. Thank you so much for coming, Sandra. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, that has been our program for today. The governance and conversation development, courtesy of African Network for Environment and Economic Justice. We've been speaking with Sandra Gwagia, who is the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer. She's also the State Coordinator of Brighter Futures Project. I mean, you heard what she said, but she'll be back here when we'll be talking about the project's impact in Bayelsa State. That's our program for today and for this week. Have a great week ahead. Bye for now.